Yeah, probably.
Hello.
That's how you do it.
How is everybody doing this evening?
Welcome to Reddit. They let us in.
They let us in the door, which is amazing. So let's give a big round of applause for Reddit for letting us use their space. So generous.
Thank you, everybody.
Amazing sponsorship. So we are presenting content and blockchain. Who's excited? There we go. We are at SF Ethereum Meetup. I'm Zane Witherspoon.
I'm Matt Quinn.
Welcome, absolutely. So we've got some great presentations for you all tonight. We've got Sean Wilkinson from Storj. Round of applause. We've got Brendan and Wyatt from Rakugo. And we've got Travis of Curio cards. So, just a minute to talk about our community. This is an amazing turnout. Thank you guys so much for coming and supporting. We've been, it was Matt actually who got this meetup started, and I kind of tagged along, asked if I could help him out, and
It's a big difference. Yeah.
we've done a lot to grow this together, and we really appreciate your support, especially all those familiar faces, all those new faces too. How many people here is this their first blockchain meetup? Oh, nice. How many people came here to say they've been to Reddit?
Raise your hands.
I know there's a few people out there. How many people here own Ethereum? Nice. That's good support. How many people here have participated in an ICO?
You don't have to raise your hands. It's legal in the US.
All right, guys. So again, thank you so much for coming and supporting. We try really hard to make these meetups everything that they possibly can be, and your support means everything to us. We really appreciate the support of our sponsors, Reddit, who brought the space, as well as Non-Imperial Capital, who brought some beer, and as well as just some very friendly faces who've managed to chip in for the pizza. So big thanks to everyone who helped out make this happen. And we have to say, if you guys are interested in helping us out, we take ETH. But seriously, if you're interested in helping us make more awesome events happen, we could always afford help with the pizza, with the spaces, with the drinks, anything that you guys can come support.
Or knowledge. If you
knowledge.
Share knowledge, that would help too.
Absolutely. If you've got anything that you think you could really bring to this community, we would absolutely love your help, because we're trying to take this decentralized world and not to re-centralize us into Reddit, but to bring us together and take all these separate nodes out there. We broke 1,000 nodes today in the meetup group, guys. That's a big deal. We're growing. So we really appreciate bringing everybody here. We hope that you connect and share with each other and grow and become sort of like a crypto family. All right, with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Travis, our very first speaker for the evening, who's going to present Curio cards. Curio.cards, mycuriocards.com, etc., etc. Thank you, Travis.
Thanks, Zane. I've been going to a couple of these now. It's a really awesome group. Thanks so much for coming out. It's definitely the biggest turnout in quite some time that we've seen here. So I don't want to take too much time, so I'll just get right into it. So Curio Cards is a platform. About a year and a half ago now, the San Francisco Bitcoin Meetup group, which I helped organize, did an event called Proof of Art, and it was a Bitcoin art show. And we had about 5 or 6 Bitcoin artists show up, and it was really exciting, really fun to kind of see the sort of new use case, new kind of culture developing around blockchain. And I started talking with Crypto Graffiti and some of the other artists that were there, and we were looking to kind of find, what could you do with this? What could you do with art and blockchain? It kind of started off as a kind of a thought experiment. We were discussing, we wanted something a bit more than just like a merchant site that you could, buy art with Bitcoin. So the idea that we kind of came down to was that it's very easy to sell physical work. Crypto Graffiti has a lot of really great kind of physical paintings you can buy, and yeah, that works very well. You can have these rare, limited, pieces of artwork hanging in your office or your home, but it's really difficult to sell digital artwork. There is no meaningful way to kind of sell at scale, because at the end of the day, a PNG file isn't special. If you have it and somebody else, you can just download it, copy it, duplicate it. There's nothing kind of interesting about holding that file. So, as we all know, or people who are new to Ethereum and blockchain, one of the sort of big core technical innovations that happen with Bitcoin and now Ethereum and all these other projects is the idea that you can have a rare, unique digital object. One Bitcoin, essentially, it's a collectible. It's something you can't counterfeit or duplicate. It's special, it's unique, but it's digital. It's entirely digital. So the idea, very simply, was why can't we apply that to the artwork itself and create rare, unique digital prints, essentially. So with that idea, we just started. We put a website up. Rhett Creighton, our CTO, he helped create Z Classic, which is a fork of Zcash. And Thomas Hunt, he is Mad Bitcoins online. You may be more familiar with him wearing a hat and big goggles. And he also runs the World Crypto Network. And he has a lot of people are asking about, connections. He has a lot of connections to kind of space and artists and creative, content producers. And we were trying to find, what we could do together. So we put this website up. This is actually the newer one. I'll go ahead and scroll it up a little bit. And it started off originally as an experiment. If you guys saw the earlier version of the website, it was very, very basic. And the idea was very simple. We would take an artist's work and put it into an IPFS hash, which is a very kind of unique fingerprint for the painting or the illustration, and then embed that into an Ethereum token. You can't make any changes to the artwork without that unique fingerprint changing. So the token represents this artwork, and then we issue a very limited supply. So some of the cards, there's only about 100 of them, others there's 2,000 of them. It was entirely up to the artist how much they wanted to make when we were trying this out. Let me just go ahead and just pick an artist here. We'll go to Robeck. So Robeck, he had an idea. He wanted to do like fantasy characters. He wanted to do wizard, bard, barbarian, and these are slightly influenced by Tom, me, and Rhett. And he also actually made a commercial for it as well, which I won't play right now, which is very fun. And essentially, this is what we were creating. So the idea is, I can give you a better example. Let me show you how many there are. So there are only 500 of each of these, and then 250 of the Rhett card. And they all sold out. This was, he launched these a few months ago now.
So the commercial.
Oh, sure. So that was obviously entirely his idea. Anyway, we'll also do the Q&A during the panel, so I want to get too much into that. It's more of an introduction to what it is that we've been working on. We're very excited to kind of take this, what started off as an experiment and an idea, and make something actually very genuinely useful for artists. And that's what we have today.
Thank you so much, Travis. Awesome, well, that's Curio cards. It amplifies the scarcity of content on the blockchain. It's a really cool project. And next, we're going to be welcoming Brendan and I believe Wyatt from the Rakugo team.
Hey everyone, how are you doing this evening? Can you all hear me at the back there all right? Good, good. So Wyatt and I are from Rakugo. We're a early stage sort of blockchain startup, and we are trying to solve a couple of issues in publishing right now, which focuses on the democratization of rights to content creators and producers, people who are actually producing work. And about a year ago, I was looking at this way. Is that better? Okay, cool. So around about 6 months ago to a year, we were looking at a couple of problems in publishing at the time, which was the advent of like fake news. We'd all seen the Trump campaign being sort of quite overwhelmed by a volume and a deluge of fake news coming out in the media. And I realized that the reason why this was happening is because there were groups of organized individuals who were procuring content in a crowdsourced manner. And when we identified this, we looked at ways in which you could leverage blockchain to do this and provide incentives to have people produce high quality content and news and publications. And we came up with the concept of Rakugo. And Rakugo is a decentralized zone for production, so content sourcing, creation, and distribution. I'm just going to dive into this next stage. So, what is Rakugo? Rakugo is an incentivized digital economic zone. And what do we mean by incentivized economic zone? This is an area, a protocol, and an ecosystem, a tokenized environment in which content producers, content creators, and content promoters can succeed and thrive if they're good actors. And we do this by sort of incentivizing people that produce high quality content in the same way that Google's algorithm and protocol looks at originality and impact of content in our kind of search results and presents that to us when we're looking at it. We also kind of wanted to tap into these more crowdsourced mechanisms. So we have the likes of BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, and a lot of fake news sites which are currently sort of exploiting content writers. When you actually publish content to these sites, you find that a lot of the time when you do this, they take the rights away from the end user, use your content, monetize it, and nothing actually comes back to you as a writer, and your rights are not very well protected. In our mind, the current economic model for distributing and sort of obtaining and acquiring content from these people is broken, and in order to fix that, we are developing our protocol to deal with this. And Rakugo provides a conduit and a platform under which people can create, source, and promote content. So I'm going to give some use cases really quickly to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So I'm not sure as many of you have seen in ICO campaigns, you'll get a lot of things being run by incentivized sort of content promotion and producing mechanisms. So in this use case, we're going to look at an ICO launch campaign. We have three personas. We have a consumer, we have a creator, and we have a supporter. Our consumer is ICO Ivan. Ivan has his ICO. He wants to have somebody review his white paper. He'd like to get a few comments, blogs, videos, and people supporting what he's doing. What he's going to do, he's going to come to the community. He is going to stake a set of Rakugo tokens worth $500 into a staking campaign. When he's done that, Ivan is going to set metrics that define the success of this campaign. So in this case, we can say it's the number of views, the number of conversions, the number of people that are viewing this review. And that defines the success of this bounty payout. So people that are producing content are going to get supported by this payout. We've then got the creator, who is Crypto Kevin. Kevin is like a very active cryptophile in the ecosystem. He understands ICOs, he's trusted. So he's going to write a blog and he's going to review our white paper or the ICO white paper of Ivan's, and he's going to submit it to review by Ivan. When that happens, Kevin is going to be rewarded based on the parameters set by the initial campaign. We are going to be doing this all around a staked economy under which the actual underlying token, Rakugo token, supports this flow of creative work and rewards-based system. Our third actor in this system is a supporter. It's Shiller Steve. We all know what a shill is in this community. He is going to go out and promote this bit of content we've created. How is he going to do that? He is going to be incentivized once again to do this in a trusted and a methodical manner by staking. Ivan is going to stake a social campaign. Supporter, our Shiller Steve, is going to join it. We have a mechanism we're building which we're kind of linking into this notion of oracleized data. And what oracleized data is taking outside data from the ecosystem, something like Google Analytics, something like AdWords, something like a Twitter feed, and it's allowing us to use that data as our kind of arbiter of this contract. So in the case of Shiller Steve, he's going to go out and start promoting this blog on Twitter. If he uses a hashtag or a parameter that tracks that, that can actually allocate stakes to him to be rewarded for his activity. So that is a basic use case here for what we're looking at doing, or what we are doing. Something less crypto-focused and kind of shows the actual way in which you can leverage this ability to stake a prize and invite people in is, in sort of the case of this independent blogger we have, Jen writes a fashion blog. She wants to scale her content. She can't right now because she's limited by her own boundaries. Like, she can't actually produce any more. She wants to write some like articles for a New York fashion magazine. So again, the notion is here, she stakes a campaign. She stakes $1,000, $500, and that is going to be open to people submit articles to her campaign. Writer Rebecca comes in, she submits 2 new articles. Our oracleized data from AdWords and Amazon affiliates pays Rebecca back a share of the revenue. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower the actual producer of the content to gain an incentive from the impact of what they're actually producing. Kate is our Instagram influencer, and again, we have an oracleized service that can talk to Instagram and understand the impact and the effect of Kate's work that then arbiters the smart contract and allows the payout of the bounty that's been put in the case of blogger Jen's actual campaign here. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, I'm sorry. So I'm going to pass over to Wyatt. That gives like a very, very high level view of what we're trying to do. Wyatt's going to talk a bit more of like our actual economy, because I think the key here is that we're looking at trying to create a media distribution creation environment under which people get rewarded for their kind of impact and being good actors in the system. So I'm going to pass over to Wyatt.
What's up, guys? Hey! Alright, so I'm gonna get to know y'all real quick. Who here has ever deployed a smart contract? Love it. Cool, made some friends. Who here is trying to start their own crypto thing? Right, okay, I dig it. So, I guess everybody has in mind what they want to do for their idea, right? And you know, everybody's trying to figure out a way to monetize. Everyone's trying to figure out a way to create some type of an ecosystem. We're no exception. So for what we're trying to do, we try to come up with the most like decentralized, like, I guess, how would I say this? Just accessible ecosystem for people who may or may not actually want to participate in our economy, but who want to actually just create content or create some type of, smart contract that can be used by people for like one of these shill campaigns we talked about before. So in order to do that, we came up with a really cool idea for a utility token. And this idea was we wanted to try and limit the disorder in our subsystem, our sub-economy, that I guess currently would exist like in the Ethereum ecosystem. So this type of approach has been, tackled by people before in a sort of hybrid space called thermoeconomics, where individuals try to describe the efficiency of a system within terms of relative entropy. So we were like, okay, we want to create like a staked economy where people who actually try to participate in our ICO, get rewarded for being an investor. We also want to try and provide a service for individuals. So what we did was we looked at something we knew of ahead of time, which is physics. Both of us have physics degrees. Fun fact. And we were like, okay, what's the actual value of this utility token we're trying to create? So this side right here, you see this participation. These are the people who are actually like creating content, who are actually participating in campaigns, who are exchanging funds within our ecosystem. That in itself revalues the actual value of our token, because you would need a token in order to interact with smart contracts that exist within the ecosystem. And this inefficiency part, that has something to do with some technical specs that we figured out along the way that we want to implement, and that have been mentioned in other projects like EOS or Plasma, if anyone's gone through reading that. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Right. So for anyone who wants to actually like participate in some type of like a crypto economy, most people think about it in terms of, I'm going to write a smart contract. It's going to be an ERC20 token, or maybe try to use some type of oracleized, I don't know, script, whatever, to look at an external API like we were talking about with our shill campaign. But that's really hard for a lot of people who, one, don't know how to code, two, just want to be able to use the blockchain itself. Why should it be that difficult? I feel like there's so many people who have already implemented something really well. Why aren't we just reusing that? So also the thing is, if you try to tokenize everything, it's not cheap, right? Like if you're going to go and try to like tokenize every rare Pepe or like, you know, coin thing we just talked about before, like you're talking like that's an overhead you have to pay. Why are we not trying to apply, you know, coding best practices we do every day in our day jobs? You know, we can do better. So considering what, you know, Vitalik and, you know, what was mentioned in Plasma, one day it was an idea I had before, it's like, why can't we just apply something like Spark to the smart contracts? So for anybody in the big data space, we're talking about like composing and basically, I have it on the next slide. Oh yeah, there it is. What was that again? Composing and chaining smart contracts, exactly. So for instance, if somebody writes a really dank, you know, marketing campaign smart contract, and somebody makes another really cool one for checking, you know, how did someone shill, why can't you just reuse those? And if that's the case, then you're probably going to be saving a lot more money than you would be if you were deploying a smart contract with both of that logic, if you just executed the method on both of those smart contracts. So therein lies the crux for, you know, what we ended up creating, which we're going to talk about in a second. That's called Constellation. But just to describe, the efficiency here is, you know, why can't we basically just reuse stuff that's already there? So yeah, we've come up with this new library. It's basically going to be a protocol like ERC20, at least in its current implementation in Ethereum, where people just implement the same interface, and any smart contract that does can be chained or composed with one another. It really just embodies some of the most basic principles in functional programming. We're basically just taking a collection of smart contracts like business logic and reducing over them. So we can go into the actual like nitty-gritty of our token economy. We'd love to. If somebody wants to ask us the question, perhaps now is not the time. But that was the approach we took. We were trying to create value by limiting wasted like gas that people have to expend to actually interact with the chain, and create an incentivized economy to get people who want to both, you know, use it for its own benefit of notarizing things, of, you know, creating like trustful transactions, and also people who actually want to, you know, use it for a business case. So that's where we are, and that's what we're providing. I think that's pretty much it. You guys probably have some questions. I'd love to answer some.
We're going to have time for questions through the Q&A panel. So thank you so much for your presentation, guys. Thank you so much, Rakugo. Last but certainly not least, before our panel, we're bringing up Sean Wilkinson of Storj.io. The storage distributor. The cloud killers themselves. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks. All right. How much time do I have? Cool. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Wilkinson. I'm the founder of Storj, and I'm really honored to be here at Reddit because we kind of got our start out of Reddit. Is this better? Am I better in frame? Awesome. So who here has heard of Storj before? Just raise your hand. Okay, a decent bit. How many of you, raise your hand if you own Storj token? Okay, just kind of polling the audience here. So for those who don't know too much about Storj, we are a decentralized and distributed cloud storage. We allow people to store data on this distributed network where you can rent out your extra hard drive space and get paid for it. And the other side of that, our company, Storj Labs, provides tools for developers to be able to store data on this platform quite simply without having to worry about the complexities of how a distributed network works, without having to worry about blockchain and cryptocurrency and all these other things that you would have to understand and know. So we just make it quite simple for people to use. And the reason why I built this kind of started in 2014. I had been involved in Bitcoin and blockchain for about 2 years. I got kind of early start. In 2012, I was mining like a half a Bitcoin a day in my college dorm, and making pennies, and suddenly that turned into a lot of money. And I was like, what is this technology? So I kind of got deeper and deeper involved over the past 2 years. From 2012 to 2014, decided, hey, let me see if I can apply this technology somewhere. And I thought cloud storage was the best place to apply it. It's a fundamental problem. It's a fundamental thing that applications use, and there's plenty of issues with it. Not really great security, websites and things getting hacked all the time. There's this performance improvements that can be made. I was looking at current offerings that are around applications like Dropbox that, again, weren't too secure, all the way up to things like Amazon S3, and just wasn't really happy with those options. So let me try to apply this technology. And blockchain, at the time, the Ethereum didn't exist. It was just Bitcoin. Was just the perfect application to mesh with that. At the time, Bitcoin was essentially the world's largest supercomputer, outclassed the top 500 supercomputers by orders of magnitude. And so it was a perfect example of, like, you could build this incentivized distributed network, and people that compute on that. Why couldn't you do it with storage? So kind of went down that rabbit hole. Beginning of 2014, won a hackathon in Texas, wrote out a white paper, posted it on Reddit, on our Bitcoin, and suddenly people got really interested in what we were doing. From multiple front page submissions on our Bitcoin, was able to gather community around 10, 20,000 people, and do a token sale. They were not called ICOs or ICOs back in the day in 2014. They were just token sales. So we were able to raise $500,000, build out an open source project centered around decentralized and distributed cloud storage. In 2014, we were more like, hey, we're going to be decentralized and distributed Dropbox that gives you a little bit more control over your data. But then we kind of found out over time that wasn't going to work out too well, because when we started to investigate that business and that model and that ecosystem, we just found that Dropbox just ships all their data to Amazon S3, or at the time they did. So we're like, we got to go one layer deeper. And so we started focusing on object storage for developers and really solving those problems. Because at the end of the day, normally you and I don't care about whether the data goes to Amazon S3 or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure. We just care that, like, these cat picture sharing applications work. So the developers are the ones who actually make most of the decisions around cloud storage. So we started essentially building it out, built a company around that, because we found that while building on an open source project is really cool and awesome, we still had to make a lot more tools to make it easier for people to use. So in 2015, founded a company with a bunch of contributors from the open source project. And we continue to build out the platform, the technology, and the product. We launched that product in March of this year, and we followed that with a second token sale. We're one of the first people to ever do a second token sale, successfully, that is, in May of this year. And we raised $30 million that helps us now really push the gas on scaling this out, hiring more engineers, more marketers to help really get this decentralized and distributed cloud storage into people's hands. So that's kind of a drive through the history of storage and what we do. So I think kind of leave it for that, and then leave the questions for the Q&A.
Awesome. I know there's got to be a lot of questions out there, which you will be able to give shortly. Now we're going to start the panel portion of our presentations. Here, I'd like to welcome Reddit's very own Raj. He's going to give himself a brief introduction. He's currently a machine learning engineer here at Reddit and a former journalist for the Wall Street Journal. So he's going to dig into his investigative skills right here. Thank you, Raj.
Welcome to Reddit. I feel like we have a few Redditors in the crowd, and you know this is where the magic happens. I wanted to just say I think HR would say I'm remiss if I don't remind people that Reddit is hiring, and so if you're interested, come talk to me later. Let's welcome our panelists on stage and give them another round of applause.
We've got 2 microphones, the fifth chair is coming. So Raj will hold one, and the panelists are going to take turns speaking with the second microphone.
All right, thanks guys. Great presentations. I have lots of questions. We're going to get into talking about ICOs and running a crypto business and issues around content in the blockchain, but I want to kind of break the ice by asking the question that everyone is here to know. So last time I checked, the price of Ethereum was exactly 3.5 minutes ago. I think it's about $295. And why don't we just go down the panel? Where do you guys think the price of Ethereum will be exactly 2 months from now, November 25th?
I guess I have the mic, so. I was very encouraged by Joseph Poon's plasma work. I think there's been a lot of sort of skepticism around Ethereum's ability to scale, and that's been holding the price back. People are very concerned, what does Ethereum look like in a couple of years? And Plasma came out, which is essentially Lightning Network for Ethereum. It's a new scaling way and a way of scaling Bitcoin, and Vitalik endorsed it quite heavily recently at a couple of events. He's very excited by it. That's definitely going to help confidence, so I don't think we're going down in the short term. I know you want my exact price, or...
If you have a range, that'd be
I'm very positive. I think it's going to go up. I think it'll be higher than it is now. I don't know. Let's say $600. $617.35. Anybody else?
Yeah. So I will say that I think that the overwhelming bearishness that's coming out of various economies is kind of interesting right now, and I think that there's likely to be a short-term impact. From my perspective, having seen the price of Bitcoin go through the sort of 2013, 2014, 2015 cycle, if anyone else saw that, I think you'll feel there's some sort of scars that are coming back when you see the market right now. For me, I definitely am. I see moves like we had the other week coming down, and it definitely brings back some quite interesting memories. But for me, I think that we have seen quite a consistent bottom in an ascending trend line. If we break that, then we're likely to see lower. But the sort of overwhelming buying and adoption of Ethereum right now is so very bullish, along with some pretty good applications that are coming out on top of it that are actually moving it into the real world sort of business application and consumer adoption. I think we're going to start actually seeing some of those grassroots things coming through. At least I'd like to think so, and I think that's certainly what we're trying to do. Is going to create like a very, very sort of bullish momentum where as soon as some of these like fears get shaken off and we break away from some of these old paradigms, we're going to see the sort of anywhere between the $500 to $800 mark. So I'm going to say by the end of November, mid sort of quarter, we could be in the 550 range.
I'm going to take the reverse opinion and probably say down. It feels very familiar to the kind of excitement train in 2014 when lots of projects were doing fundraising around that time, and there was definitely a pretty hard cooling off period afterwards. So I think it'll who knows what will happen. But from my position, I try to play, what's the worst that could happen? And if it turns out all right, then okay. But plan for the worst.
Yeah, on a more serious note, to follow up with that, when you're running a crypto business, how much do you watch the day-to-day, week-to-week volatility, given that your funds or the funds that you're trying to raise are crypto assets? Or maybe they're not. Maybe you actually turn them all into fiat because you're worried about volatility.
Yeah. So probably can take this well because we've kind of been two swings and we've done essentially 2 token sales. In 2014, we raised about $500,000. I think Bitcoin was, let's say, $500 around there. And immediately after, the entire crypto ecosystem just slid out from under us. So a lot of projects, including Ethereum, were pretty hurt by that because everyone was so excited about the future. And just seeing constant growth that no one was really quite prepared for what happened in reality. It hurt us a lot. I think I remember. I think the Ethereum Foundation was 2 months from running out of money completely, and probably shutting down before Ethereum just kind of rebounded, and now they have almost infinite money. So I really encourage people who are doing fundraisings, token sales, or whatnot, to probably grab some dollars or some other assets, diversify a little bit, because the history repeats. So it's best to be a little bit more prepared for what could happen.
So how do you hedge yourself if you're working on a full-time project in crypto, but you expect bearish market?
So.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I can repeat the question. I think the question was, how do you hedge yourself if you're working full-time in crypto? Is that the question?
Yeah, because he said his overall sentiment is bearish, which I can agree with to some extent. So I'm just wondering how you feel about this.
Yeah, so kind of long-term bullish, but short-term kind of prepared for bearishness. Is making sure you have you see some people who are just like who run crypto businesses that this is their first time and they're just like all in crypto, and then market shift happens and how do I pay the bills? So it's useful to get some cash. I think there's some people are really working on some interesting things like kind of stable cryptocurrencies. Things that I'm really excited about is stuff. Has anyone heard of Salt before? Raise your hand. So it allows you to essentially have essentially a debt-backed kind of crypto token, where you can take your Bitcoin, for example, use it as collateral, get cash, and so if the Bitcoin or Ethereum goes down, then you essentially just sold it. But if it goes up long term, well, you just repay your loan and you keep your crypto. So those are the things that I'm really interested in, is those just unique little things in the industry where you can both be kind of bearish and bullish at the same time, just based on its programmable money. So those are things I'm excited about. So people are working on those problems.
Brendan, I think you guys recently had an ICO sale. You may be having another one in the upcoming future. With the news from the SEC about the way that they're looking at tokens as securities, and also the news from China that they may be banning cryptocurrency exchanges. How does that complicate things for you guys as you plan an ICO?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it adds a lot of vagueness, to be perfectly frank, into what you're doing when you go into this. I think it stipulates two really key things you have to do. It's number one, make sure that you are getting good legal advice that you really do trust and that you can kind of work step by step with. So the cookery book isn't written right now, right? So this whole thing that we're all trying to figure out in this room, there are no real rules, right? We're all trying to figure out what is the best way of approaching this in a way that is constructive both for us and for the likes of the SEC. They want to see this kind of thing succeed. They want to unlock some of the value in crowdfunding in this market, but doing it in a safe way. So at the moment, I think that there should be considerations specifically for us. When we first went into our initial ICO, we set out to provide a revenue-backed token whereby, as part of the protocol, the actual holder would receive some actual benefit rather than being architected as a platform token, which is what you see a lot of other people doing. So I think it's going to create a more robust framework for people to work within. And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm hopeful that there will be ways in which asset-backed, sort of whether they be an equity-type token or a revenue-backed token or a profit-backed token, can actually come into fruition. But I think the important approach right now is to look at it in a stepwise sort of manner. So if you're looking at individual buckets of funding through your ICOs, your first one is going into maybe in a SAFT agreement whereby you are looking forward to have the ability to work with regulators and attorneys to make sure that as you move within that structure, by the time you go to issue your main token sale, you are doing it in a way that is either in a jurisdiction that supports it or at a time where there may or may not be a framework. So to answer your question, I think right now it should be the most important thing you think about. You should really consider heavily your choice of token and the actual ecosystem you're trying to build, and look at the whole place as a bigger collective organism. Like, we are looking to try and build a content media part of a bigger ecosystem. There are people out there building file storage that we can plug into. There are people out there building a meme economy. There are other people out there building worlds in which you can actually create a decentralized fundraising structure, and this all links together to be a bigger organism. So when you look at it in that context of creating almost economic zones within blockchain, like tokenized economic zones, they don't need to be a security. So there's various layers. At the moment we're in the protocol development phase, and as applications build on top of those operating systems, however they're built, there will be the need to kind of look at whether it be an equity type token and to work with sort of, you know, a good attorney and go through a few. Don't just pick one, like try a couple out and see if they're all saying the same thing, because they don't already know.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about developing on the blockchain, and in a lot of ways it's a paradigm shift from the more kind of centralized models of development that we've had. And not to go into too much technical detail, but maybe Travis, you can answer this one. As you think about kind of building out Curio cards, what are the trade-offs involved with decentralization as a engineering and technological paradigm? Because there's one thing we know about engineering is that there's always trade-offs.
Yeah, and there are a lot of very unique things with programming on a blockchain. The term I've heard described before is Bitcoin is a $70 billion bug bounty program. If you make a mistake, it's money, it's real money right there, you know, at the protocol layer. There was the example recently of the Parity wallet, right? You know, it was audited, it was checked. One of the guys who helped create that bit of code was one of the authors of the programming language used, and they still had this bug. And I think it was like $50 million or more was stolen. So security is extremely difficult to the point where almost you can't really ever be sure. So it's really important to make sure what you are putting on the blockchain is what is necessary. So the way we look at that is the concept of ownership is really important with artwork. There's different ways of approaching art. You know, you can use DRM, digital rights management, kind of like, or paywalls, restrictions, or copyright, which is more legal. But when just buying a piece of artwork, it's the ownership, right? I have it, you can't take it from me, it's mine now, it's on my wall. So we make sure that part is in the blockchain, because it's very necessary that part's immutable. It's very necessary that ownership is decentralized. Whereas other aspects of the platform, you know, like the website, you know, where wallets are hosted, etc., they're not necessarily need to be 100% decentralized, and you're just introducing a lot of complexity and risk since it's such an early space. And I love what you were saying before about, you know, kind of the experts in the space. Like, there are no experts right now in the blockchain. Like, you know, somebody says, I'm a blockchain expert, I'm a Bitcoin expert, I'm an Ethereum expert. Maybe they know a lot about those things, but there are no experts because we don't know what any of this stuff's for yet. we haven't seen really great large-scale examples of this working. So I think it's just very important to kind of compartmentalize that risk and be very honest with yourself about what you're making.
Yeah, there's also the complication that there's maybe one blockchain to rule them all. Maybe that's the end goal that we all end up at. Maybe there's multiple blockchains. And I know, Sean, you guys have actually moved blockchains, right? Like, you guys used to be on Bitcoin, and now I think earlier this year you guys moved to Ethereum. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe painful or difficult or easy maybe even that migration was, and how do you kind of plan for that going forward when there's this underlying technology you depend on, this layer, and you don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow?
Oh, you don't plan. That was a painful process. One of the benefits of our platform is that we're kind of token and payment layer agnostic. So we had flexibility built in at the very beginning that, hey, we can use different tokens and things for this platform. So we started out in 2014. At that time, Bitcoin was the cool thing. Ethereum didn't exist, or well, it was just getting started. So actually, in 2014, we were doing a crowd sale the exact same time that Ethereum was doing their token sale. I was actually with Vitalik in Blacksburg, Virginia, hanging out with a few other crypto dudes, and so I put some money into the Ethereum crowd sale, and Vitalik put some money into our token sale. It worked out pretty well for most of us, I think. And so Ethereum didn't exist. And so we use Bitcoin, we use a platform called Counterparty, which is essentially a meta protocol or a layer on top of Bitcoin that you could use to create tokens. And we call this token Storj coin, or SJCX. And so we use this within our platform, and it worked all green and dandy then when we created it. The Counterparty was a new cool thing. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of development going on. But that changed over time. People started to get more and more excited about this Ethereum thing. People started to develop, and it began to grow essentially a network effect on this is a platform where you create tokens. And counterparties kind of started to fade in terms of development. The other thing is that starting last year, Bitcoin started to experience some really hard and heavy scalability issues. So you'd send a transaction for Bitcoin that was supposed to take 10 minutes, and it ends up taking much longer. So we'd have our users trying to use our token in the platform, and they'd send a transaction that's supposed to take 10 minutes, and it instead takes 3 days. So that's not good. The fees, again, based on Bitcoin scaling issues, went up and up and up. We pay users every month for essentially renting out their hard drive space. So what was negligible fees started being 20%, 20-30%. And then the software just became more and more kind of out of date as people lost interest in that platform. So we decided, well, this isn't good. Our users aren't happy. Probably should do something about this. This Ethereum thing looks pretty nice. And seems to be kind of growing and getting a network effect. So we made the very kind of painful decision, okay, let's switch over. And we did a lot of work around that, and it ended up being a very, very, very good decision. Now instead of taking days to transfer tokens, it takes seconds. Now instead of very high transaction fees, it's pretty much negligible now. And now we interoperate with a huge, massive ecosystem that's being built around Ethereum and ERC20 tokens. So that was kind of our switch, and hope Ethereum stays around and grows in the future, because would not like to have to do that again. But I think a lot of people are excited about the platform now, and it's definitely growing, but I think there'll definitely be a time when there'll be new technology out, and people will have to think about switching. So we'll see where it goes in the future.
Yeah, Ethereum and Bitcoin this year, we've seen they've followed very different kind of development methodologies as communities. And this is a question that I think all of you guys have probably thought about at some point. With Bitcoin, we've seen almost gridlock, where the scaling debate has been very difficult to resolve, where the founder, Satoshi, is MIA, maybe on purpose, maybe not. And Ethereum is completely the opposite. You have very strong leadership in Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation. But there's also people who are worried about that because there's a lot of hard questions, especially as they try to scale Ethereum and move to proof of stake and sharding. How do you think about the leadership of the Ethereum Foundation? Are there vulnerabilities there in terms of what if they make a mistake? They're very smart guys, but they are human at the end of the day.
I'll take this a little bit and then pass it off. It's interesting. You have like these decentralized projects, and thinking broader than just like the Ethereum ecosystem. Thinking as like open source projects that are somewhat decentralized and distributed. Anyone can contribute code, fork it. Sometimes you do have like really strong quote unquote centralized leadership. If you think of like Linux, for example, or you think of like Python creator, like people who are really kind of driving and helping people make decisions, because when you just have so many thoughts and opinions on where things can go, it makes it very hard to form consensus. And it becomes even more difficult when you start throwing money into it. And so I think it's very useful to have kind of more top level kind of leadership in some cases, like Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation are just going to charge ahead and get things done. If people don't like it, they can fork. So, I mean, it's best of both worlds.
So yeah, I think this is kind of an interesting question, specifically after you mentioned, is there going to be one blockchain to sort of rule them all? Because I think what we're seeing at the moment is a current, I don't want to say impatience, but it's the creativity that everyone embodies in this space. So who is the right person to lead or make decisions? I definitely agree that there's strong leadership at head of Ethereum, but also it's kind of on us as well to contribute and also push up the chain and make active contributions in the community. And you see this in the form of other blockchains, like EOS, for example, with what they're trying to develop with their SDK and the way they're kind of looking at scaling with Waves. You have all these very different platforms that are coming out, approaching it in a different way. But at the same time, we can contribute to these projects as well. And if there is, I feel like there is an open ear in the Ethereum Foundation for people that want to contribute. And that community contribution is going to actually kind of aid that scaling, whereas Bitcoin is a little bit more fragmented. Like, let's be honest here. We now have 2 Bitcoins. We may see 3 in 2 months' time at the end of November with SegWit 2. That is very different to the community-driven approach that is in Ethereum, and I think that that is going to create more innovation in the space.
Yeah, definitely a very good point. Bitcoin went through this. They had their debate, their scaling debate, and there was gridlock and it was unresolved, and now there are 2 Bitcoins. And we're going to see both projects sort of back their own technology and then at some point kind of come to a head and try to compete against each other potentially. And as Sean mentioned, if you don't like a decision that Vitalik makes with Ethereum, you can fork, and this has happened in the past. Yeah, with Ethereum Classic, that was more of an ideological dispute than a technological dispute. And that was quite some time ago now, I believe, in the world of crypto. So, while not on the same sort of scale as Ethereum is now, because it's a smaller project now it is, but Ethereum's entering into some very controversial changes as well, with their switching over to more hybrid and then eventually proof of stake model, making kind of decisions on scaling that people might disagree with, and we'll probably see some more Ethereum forks as well in the future. I think what's important to remember when you're creating something on these platforms is to know that you can kind of essentially vote with where you put your support, right? If you have a really cool, really useful product and you decide, I'm going to be on this chain, you're adding immense value to that chain. Ethereum's price in a lot of ways is driven entirely by this huge ICO craze. Obviously, technology is very interesting and exciting, but for the most part, it's not really utilized. The full wealth of the smart contract ability on Ethereum isn't necessarily utilized very often because of the security concerns. It's very complex. You have to make sure the contracts are very well tested and understood. So ICOs are the most common smart contract used. So that price is driven by these projects deciding I'm going to launch on that platform.
Yeah, thanks. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. And all of you guys in some way, as the theme of the night kind of represents, are involved with content and on the blockchain. And there are kind of a host of thorny issues involved when you are in the content business. One of them is piracy. And you guys at Curio Cards are kind of like trying to figure out how to deal with that. How do you do that when you're developing in a decentralized paradigm on the blockchain and you may not really control, you don't have the centralized control of the content that your platform is hosting? How do you actually go about making sure that I can't just download one of your artists' artwork and just spread it around myself?
So I would actually encourage you to do that. I'm sure the artists would as well. The way we're building this platform is we don't want to have the idea of the PNG file or the JPEG file be what's, that's the image. And you should be able to share a high resolution, non-watermark version if you wish. It shouldn't be you have to pay to get access to the secret version behind the wall that shows you what it really looks like. So hopefully you build a platform where you can just share the art. And what's important is the ownership of the token. So to kind of step back more to the general question you're asking about piracy and copyright, I mean, this is open source, right? I mean, smart contracts are open source. Somebody could go in, they could copy all the Curio Card contracts and launch their own version. What's important to remember is the token, if you were to buy a piece of artwork for someone that you really like, and you now have that kind of Curio token for that artwork, and somebody were to go ahead and try to make essentially like a counterfeit Curio, it'd be a distinctly different token. They can't change the one that you have. They can't take away the one that you have. So when you're working in a system that's very unknown, dynamic, Ethereum, Foundation, Vitalik, they could make sweeping changes when they want. It's almost more important to have that user control, right? And you as a user, you have your token. The Ethereum Foundation can't take it away from you. The project, us, we can't take it away from you. And if there was an attempt to take that token away from you, which is what happened actually with Ethereum's fork, there was somebody who hacked a lot of Ethereum tokens, and Ethereum said that never happened. So essentially they were taking it back from the hacker, right? And even though no one had any real love for the hacker, they were just so upset from an ideological point of view that the project forked, and there was Ethereum Classic was created, and it did very well for quite some time. So yeah, I think the solution there in the decentralized, it's almost like it's more of a feature than a bug, that the fact that it is decentralized protects you, because you can hold on to it yourself.
Similarly, for you guys at Rakugo, one of the, as Travis pointed out, you guys are building a library of smart contracts, and smart contracts, by definition, are kind of open source. How do you fight spammers, or, as you mentioned, kind of the inspiration for this was fake news? How do you fight people who are trying to game your system when you put the rules out there for them to know, how this entire thing works?
Well, so to take that question, obviously we have a little phrase we like to use, which is make your own sandwich. Someone can use some technology that you create for good or for bad. That's not up to us. We merely give you the choice. We like to think, yeah, sure.
So, I think one of the big things about decentralized technology like blockchain, like what we're building, is that it's all incentivized, right? So the whole point of securing a network and hashing via mining is to secure it by consensus. And that anyone that's trying to post a bad transaction or a fraudulent transaction cannot, because it doesn't agree the consensus on the network. Now, when we're looking at how we are looking to incentivize good actors in the system, we're going to call them now instead of bad actors, is by majority consensus. So when you're looking at an ecosystem, or like Darwinian economics, for example, in this case, the people that produce the highest quality and the highest impacting material should be the ones that thrive. That should be the cream that rises to the top, right? So by creating incentivized mechanisms, it doesn't necessarily make it impossible to game, but it makes it harder for bad actors to thrive in this ecosystem. The approach we're taking is not suppression. It is not blocking people from saying what they're saying. It is that if you contribute in a positive manner to the ecosystem, then you get rewarded. And currently in our current paradigm, it's that the wrong people get rewarded for doing that work because it's a centralized system. Publishers do not reward good content. They have large banks of editors that produce material for like news articles and things like this, which is a burden, that's a loaded cost. And there isn't the ability to have community-driven free speech in those sort of environments. And within our ecosystem, the way we're looking at building that is by promoting and doing like a trust radius to people that produce high-quality content. So we're doing it through behavior. We're not the arbiter of that. And I'll pass over to what I'd say.
Yeah, so perhaps it's a little esoteric. Sort of on piggybacking on the first question you asked, the real value, is that in like actually, I don't know, like hiding something behind a paywall or trying to, you know, make something artificially scarce? No, it's actually in creating greater connections to your community. So that's what we do. We try to make it easier for people to get access to make their content, you know, seen by, you know, greater audiences to have more impact, because, you know, we feel like the real value is not actually trying to, you know, keep someone, you know, treat it like a bridge with a tollway. It's like you don't need to pay someone to get your funds, you know, to get the value out of what you created. It's actually by creating some type of a lasting relationship within a network. And in that same regard, you know, who's to say what's good or bad? The truth is we want to just make things fair. You know, we want to give people an equal footing. And I think that's how we all see and find the best in ourselves and our communities.
It gets a little tricky in the data storage business, I think, when you're hosting content. There's a range of illegal content out there that goes well beyond just copyright. That is very dangerous, and things that you probably do not want out in that world. In your kind of decentralized paradigm, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so we try to simplify that problem as much as possible. Is that the data is encrypted on the client side. Only the user has the keys to that data. It is broken up into small pieces and distributed over the network. So at the end of the day, if someone's like, what's that content over there? I don't know. We don't have the keys. Only the user has the keys. And so in our system, and this is part of our ideology, is that the user should, you know, ultimately have control over the data, because once you start going into those kinds of questions, it can be a very slippery slope. I believe, I forget the Northern European country that said, hey, we're creating this system to eliminate you know, bad illegal content of like abuse and stuff like that. And everyone's like, yay, let's put in the system. And everyone was fine with that. And then the essentially copyright industry came in and said, so you have that system now where you can like censor and remove content. Let's get a court order to use that system to, you know, remove our movie from the system. And the court said, yeah, that sounds fine. So it goes down a very slippery slope. So in our system, we kind of take a step back to say, hey, we're just going to be a neutral platform. We're going to be, you know, the data Switzerland. Only give the users control over the data, and we found that that's a much better way to go about building that platform.
Just to follow up, if I'm hosting something on Storj, and there's somebody I have a shard of a file or a file of some abusive content, for example, are there legal implications for me as somebody who's hosting that content?
So for that, essentially all the data is encrypted and sharded before it even leaves the originating computer. So all you're getting is an encrypted piece of a file. So you look at the file and it just looks like garbage to you on the other side. And so that's like number one protection, is just through security and abstraction. You just can't tell what's there. You don't know what's there. And that's your essentially plausible deniability. The second thing is that there's laws that came in the past decade or so. It's essentially the I'm forgetting the exact laws, names of the laws, but essentially it protects content hosters from essentially liability of storing data. It's the thing that keeps, YouTube or Reddit or all these other places that might aggregate content from getting sued out of existence. Essentially, what you do is it's a protection where you just say, hey, you have the content, please remove it. And if you remove it, then you're fine. But the problem with our system is all the data is encrypted, and only the content originator knows what's where. So it makes it very difficult to kind of censor and remove data, and that's by design, for security, privacy, and many other reasons.
Great. One more question, then we can open it up to maybe questions from the audience. There's a lot of people here that are interested in getting into crypto. Developers, non-developers. Any advice? How to go about doing that?
I mean, it's easy to get started. There's many guides, applications, and things out there for you to get started, get learning. You don't necessarily have to buy crypto. You can just mine it with resources on your computer. I happen to know one cool company that allows you to rent out your extra hard drive space for crypto. It's called Storj. You just rent out your drive. So that's a good way to get started. It takes about 2 minutes to set up. So.
I hear they have a lot of developer documentation as well.
Yeah, I hear we have that too, so you can start building applications. So it's just me being biased. Oh, I do have to mention, we are hiring developers. So I think Nadine, our evangelist, would get mad at me if I didn't mention that. So come speak to us after if you're interested.
So my view is possibly a little bit different to that. I think it's actually quite challenging to get into the crypto space right now. I think for anyone that's coming in from the outside, it is a quite intimidating world, especially with price fluctuations. And I think that your best effort to succeed right now is to become part of a community, which is what you're doing here. I think one of the underpinning fundamentals of cryptocurrencies, tokenized economies, is the notion of community and building relationships that connect you to other people, and trusted ones. I think when you're starting out, I'm actually going to say that I think mining is actually an amazing way of really tangibly getting into crypto. 2013, I started mining Doge in December with a script miner that I built, and then jumped around doing loads of different mining pools. And during that process, it gives you a really interesting, I guess, easy on-ramp to kind of figuring out what it's like. Yes, it's technical. Yes, you have to build some stuff, but you can do it with anything. You can do it with your normal laptop. You can do it with a GPU. There is a ton of different coins out there, and it really does kind of get you thinking about how this whole system works. And from there, just read, but be careful what you read, right? Okay, so take that with a pinch of salt, because there's a ton of resources out there, and finding out what are good resources is really challenging. So, for example, what we're doing right now as part of one of our proof of concepts is we're going to be crowdsourcing developer resources, tutorials, educational materials that have come from the community where they're highly rated, and hosting them so as people can gain free access to them. And I think that's something that the community has to be very active in. So I think it's quite challenging to get into this space. I think it's quite scary. And I think that for a lot of people, easy on-ramp is mining, and just select what you read. Don't read it all and believe it, because it's very, very hard to pick the wheat from the chaff.
This guy mined the first block of Dogecoin. It's real, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that mining or just making something, make something. I mean, anyone can go out there and buy a coin in exchange, but I started by making, assets on Counterparty. It's cool.
It's important to remember that cryptocurrency is, for the most part, open source project, and those same kind of ideals of open source community do apply. And if you want to get involved in an open source project, in open source space, you just find a project that's really interesting to you, like if it's a Debian, a really interesting project, and you say, hey, how can I help out? And you show up, you go on their Git, you look at your issues they have. If you're a developer, it's a great way to get involved, because you don't necessarily need to understand the entire thing. You can find some small space that you can contribute and learn along the way. And ideally find a mentor, someone who can help guide you through it, because it is so complicated. If you make a mistake in crypto, it can be quite an expensive mistake. So finding that mentor, finding that community, treating it like any other kind of open source ecosystem. And then, as mentioned, community, coming to these events. The SF Ethereum event, there's SF devs, there's also San Francisco Bitcoin developers, and then I also run the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup group additionally, and we have events where we just go to bars and hang out and just show up and talk. And the only last thing I would say is, if you want to get involved from an investment standpoint, like you're not a developer, I'm a big fan of an idea called dollar cost averaging. So it's very hard to know when to buy, and you're very concerned prices go up, down, and there's all these ICOs and want to get involved in. Just like pick the big projects like Ethereum or Bitcoin and buy like a little bit every day. And what happens is you end up getting the average price. So that's a cool concept to look up, I'd suggest.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for a few questions from the audience. If you guys want to raise your hands, I can pick you up. Yeah. I'll repeat the question too.
So I love all these projects. I love the ones that have a lot of token involvement. My question is, like, from a consumer perspective, like, am I gonna have to go to Poloniex to use your products like a coin, or like, what are you guys looking at, like making it easier to get the coins to use your platform? Do you guys have opinions on that?
Yeah, the question is about, as a consumer, how are you guys thinking about making it easier to get the coins to use your platform?
Yeah, just real quick, there's a concept called atomic swaps you can look into. This is something that we're going to see more and more of. Ideally, you don't need to go buy a token for everything you need. You just kind of get the token as you need it. But I mean, you'll probably have better answers here as well.
Yeah, I think Bancor is going to make a huge impact with that, and also even something like Shapeshift right now would be a lot easier.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as well. I think the two things that Wyatt brought up upon was like very important pieces. Solutions like Shapeshift are going to reduce the retail barrier. So when you're going in and out of currencies, there are going to be more retail-focused solutions that are going to allow the transacting in and out of the overall ecosystem. And then if we're looking at these economic zones that I keep talking about within cryptocurrency, whereby you have a file storage solution, you have a media creation, content distribution, you have a meme economy over here, those economies are going to be linked by using something like Bancor. There is going to be this seamless transition between these zones. There may be a zone for creating tokenized and incentivized food. There may be one for power over here. Each of these economies will be linked by some of these solutions. So your on-ramp is going to be a retail or a consumerization of some of these services, where it's like Coinbase. Like Coinbase will, I'm sure, at some point move to tokens, and there will be a seamless experience going in and out in the same way you use a credit card. And that will just come with time.
Yeah, so that's one of the big barriers to kind of adoption. Is it's like, hey, this is a really cool product and service. We kind of thought of this like, hey, it has better privacy and better security and better performance, and so you're adding up like benefits. They say to be disruptive, you have to be 10x better than the previous one. Oh, you have to go acquire a token, like back to square one. So we've made a very conscious choice to, like, when you want to, since we ran out your hard drive, you used to have to like get the token and like stake it in your wallet and do all that kind of stuff. Completely eliminated that. You just download the software, hit go. For people who want to store data on the platform, we take care of that too. We just say, hey, you get free cloud storage to start off with that we pay for it, so you can just kind of play around with it and use it, and then you can pay in our token, you can pay in Bitcoin, you can pay in credit cards, whatever. Like, don't worry about that. Worry about actually using the platform. And so we do a lot of that behind the scenes in terms of like dealing with the token, but we don't feel like the user should have to deal with that necessarily at the start, because it's just a bad experience and no one will use it.
Any other questions? Yeah, right here.
So follow up that question, Sean. So let's say if I only have US dollars, can I actually buy your token using my US dollar bank account, or should I buy Ethereum first?
Yeah, so his question was that can you buy essentially storage service in dollars? Yes, right now you can go right on our website, sign up for an account, and add your credit card and pay in dollars. And what we do is we take care of all that behind the scenes in terms of the crypto token. Because at the end of the day, the cloud storage industry is a $20–30 billion industry, and that's not in tokens. That's in dollars. So we'll take those dollars, and then we'll deal with the crypto for you. And again, it just makes it easier. So I think as time goes on, there will be easier on-ramps and off-ramps, maybe a little bit of a cyclical economy where I'll rent out my hard drive space and then use those tokens to pay for the service. But right now, it's just like, it's a, you know, $20-30 billion pie. Let's like make it easier for them to come in.
I think there was a question in the back, right there, yeah.
Yeah, what are some of the most attractive qualities and potentially frustrating qualities when it comes to the lawyer that you choose in the ICO?
I think the question is, what are some of the most attractive qualities and some of the most frustrating qualities when it comes to picking a lawyer?
I have this one. So there's like 3. So there's not that are like top in the space. It's Perkins, Cooley, and Goodwin are my top 3 choices. I think I think the most difficult thing is it costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of people that want to work with them. So we work with Perkins, tangentially kind of see a lot of Cooley's work, and then I use Goodwin. So those are the 3 that I recommend just knowing across the space. The others don't have as much experience as those 3.
Yeah, so I'm going to add a comment to that as well, and maybe again slightly different, just because I think we're coming into this at different times. So I think that with the rate of development of legal implications and structures like we've seen, it comes down to the relationship you're looking to build with an attorney. I think there are some very big shops. DuBois Pimpleton is another one in San Francisco who claim to be one of the better ones. But you will end up looking at paying a 4% fee of your overall raise up to a capped amount that is in that yes, absolutely. $750,000, $750,000 is the way their payment structure actually works. So that is a huge barrier to a lot of people looking at doing this. I would say there are a lot of attorneys also trying to figure this out as well, and make the decision whether you're looking to figure it out with somebody that you trust and you have a relationship with. I don't think anyone can say they know everything. Like, I really want to stress that with the legal stuff here. Just because you're paying that amount of money doesn't mean they're going to get this in the hole for you and you know that it's all covered. Take your time, go through the steps, and like move with the market where it is now, because there's a long way to go and it's changing all the time. And somebody that tells you that they know how to take care of this is not really telling you the full picture, I don't think. So build a good relationship, grow with that lawyer, and when it's right to go up to an expensive one, that lawyer should be telling you to then go up to the big boys. If that's somebody you're talking to in that way, then they're likely to give you a good service. But it's hard.
There's additional frustration as well that I've been hearing a lot about, which is a lot of these ICOs, they'll use something like a Swiss entity or a company out of Singapore, Estonia, Cayman Islands, like something like that. That's sort of like is become advice, even though there are no experts in what the legal, no one knows the right way of doing an ICO necessarily. This is like the standard advice. You have to have one of these, and the backlog on some of them is quite extreme. The lawyers in Swiss, they're called Corps. The backlog is months, potentially even years, before you can actually get someone to work with you.
Yeah, right here in the front.
Yes, my question's mainly for Rakugo. In terms of helping create a community around incentivizing positive creation of content and stuff like that, can you talk about the trade-offs of ease of use for new users, and then Sybil attack prevention, and the notion of reputation, and maybe how that relates to what you guys are working on?
So the question is for Rakugo around Sybil attacks and the trade-offs involved with making it easy for new users to sign up, but not create kind of like sock puppet accounts, so that they can upload their own content. Kind of how do you handle that?
Yeah, is there any notion of reputation in your system in order to prevent that?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the reputation aspect. So I mean, the true value of your relationship with the network is your meme. I mean, actually, we've come up with the concept of when you actually become a part of the network, you create a meme token. Or not a meme token, but like a meme smart contract that represents you, and that in itself will develop some type of reputation. So if you follow through on your promises with individuals, then you'll have a positive rating and people will want to do business with you. You get what you put out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know how many people here, put your hands up, use Bitcoin Talk to either find ICOs, have used Bitcoin Talk, have launched ICOs through Bitcoin Talk. Anyone here? So it's a pretty old school like forum interface, and it has a community rating system which is based on activity and also sort of community voting. And the way that you would classically run a campaign through that quite old system would be reputation based. So you would get a higher reward based on your actual community reputation. We see that the value is not necessarily in upvoting or downvoting content for what our application is. It's providing an environment in which the highest performant content gets the highest reputation, that gets aggregated within your meme. So you build a trust radius over time, and that actually gives you more credibility to your content. But you have to put some work in to get that. You know, everyone starts at the same place and you build that reputation and trust. So that's the question.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, right there.
I have a question on mass adoption.
Okay.
So what are the mass adoption of this technology in the very early stage right now, and what are the steps that people think has to go today with the planet?
So I think the question is, what steps, since we're such an early stage, what steps are still required for mass adoption and to kind of take over the planet? And if I could just add to that a little bit, kind of like, we're still, Brian Armstrong likes to say that we're in the Netscape moment. He's the CEO of Coinbase. He likes to say we're in the Netscape moment. And we're still waiting for that first killer app of, decentralized technology. What do you guys think that's going to be?
So I think it's going to be Rakugo.
Okay, let me say outside of your own kind of.
Had to say it. So I think that's a really great question. It's like, I think something we are really trying to solve for. There's a couple of stages we're in right now. So if you go back to when computers were invented, we had sort of not even protocol level. You had sort of machine code running on chips. You had a processor in a big case that churned out some code. You then had, in the 90s, a lot of people creating OS operating systems. And I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of people creating these, what are effectively operating systems on top of something like Ethereum. So a protocol level which allows you to actually extract value from that computation, and then there will be apps built on top of that. We are getting some people, us included, that are trying to bridge this divide and put these apps on top of some of these protocols. Now, what is required to bring on mass adoption? Not seeing blockchain is my view. Having it behind the scenes, taken care of, where you can come in, you can transact in your normal way. It's very similar to if you think about when you're buying cryptocurrency, you would like to go with a trusted party. You go to a website, a funny exchange like Poloniex or Poloniex, however you want to call it, and it's not like walking into a bank and being taken care of. There almost needs to be a user experience which is very hand-holding and takes you through something you're already familiar with. So as you build an affinity with the product and get the inherent benefits of blockchain without necessarily being sold on the features of it for mass adoption, there is a long way to go. But I think it requires people seamlessly using it as part of their everyday lives to see the benefit. When that happens, they will then go out and seek it after that point. And that might seem like an obvious point, but like, we're not there yet, and it's going to take some time until somebody does that.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you look at our website and like the Wayback Machine, you look at the mentions of like Bitcoin and blockchain in the beginning, and they just kept on going down and down and down and down and down. Is that just abstraction is really important. People shouldn't have to think or worry about what technology is going on under the hood. And that's really all we do, and that's what the really successful cases, like for example Coinbase has done, is they've just abstracted it away to make it really easy. I mean, for us, we had to build a protocol, and then we had to build an API, and then we had to build an object storage tool, and then we have an application like FileZilla that we integrated in, which has millions of users. That sits on top. So like multiple layers of abstraction just to get there to something that users can actually use. And so they don't have to worry about dealing with all this technology. They register an account, they sign in, they drag and drop their files. It's done. And that's what's really needed for mass adoption, is more levels of abstraction to again abstract away this really complicated technology to like something we can actually use in our daily lives. So that's my thesis, at least.
All right. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's definitely a UI problem. It's also a technology problem because if you look, when you say mass adoption, like you say, once you take over currency, Ethereum and Bitcoin are terrible money. There was for an example, there was the Status ICO a few months back, and the Ethereum network was completely shut down for like 2 days. And that was just a couple thousand people trying to get in on a sale. And it just maxed out its capacity. Bitcoin's even worse. It's like 3 transactions per second. I mean, 7 theoretically, but you can't do that. And that can't be money, right? It's the dollar per transaction. Ethereum's better, but it's still not there. It doesn't even get anywhere close to like MasterCard or Visa scale. Now, if you wanted to, say, mass adoption for, like, say, a commodity asset like investment, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they kind of already have what they need from a technology standpoint. People already use Bitcoin as an investment, like buying steel futures or something. It's slow and it's cumbersome, and that's all you expect. I'm not going to buy coffee with GM stock, right? I mean, it functions already, but then there's that UI issue, right? It's very hard to hold it. You can't really secure it. So abstraction, layer 2, adding an extra, making it faster, cheaper, easier to use if you're going after the currency market. I guess it all comes down to what is it you're trying to take over.
Great, let's give a last round of applause for our panelists. Thanks for visiting Reddit. I think Zane may have some final words. On your way out, the trash cans are in the back over there. So if you want to dump your stuff there, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, and let's give it up, a round of applause for Raj. What an incredible moderator. Really appreciate it. Little known fact, Raj came to one of our meetups a few months ago, and he's actually the connection, the reason that we get to use Reddit space at all. So really, really, thank you so much, Raj. I really appreciate it. All right, guys. So Reddit wants us out of here, which is fair. So we're moving the networking and socializing aspect to Swig, just across the street. There's a guy, Shane.